Wow. So quiet.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. It's a good place to start the year with champagne, no? Start there with champagne. I love that. The good guy. There was the little guy, the good guy. It's interesting. It's like, no, you thought about that one.
Is there anybody you want to say hello to in the room that you haven't already said hello to?
Well, actually, I could only do 3/4 of the table because, 3/4 of the room, there's still a table. I just want to say hello to everyone. But, in politics, you're nothing without a team. And I just want to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues who are here. As you know, this has been a momentous time in Canadian politics, and I think everyone who stepped up to serve somehow deserves that we recognize them, and I certainly want to do that. So my dear friend Francesco Sabara, which is the chair of our Alto Caucus. Francesco, thanks for being with us today. Ali Alassi is with us, which is one of the most accomplished trade lawyers that you can imagine in the country. Pam Damorf, that if we have isotope in this country and we continue, thank you, Pam. You've literally saved lives in this country. James Maloney, when I'm next to James, I say, always sit down because I look taller when you're sitting down. So James Maloney, which is the voice of Ontario for all of us in caucus. And I could be remiss if I didn't say hello to my good friend, Mayor of Kitchener, Barry. Barry's somewhere. So Mayor, thank you very much for your service to the nation. Amanda, it's great to be with you, and we have more than 5 minutes, I'm told. Usually when I'm on your show, we have to do it quickly, but I'm told now we have an hour, or?
Yeah, 3 hours, if you like.
3 hours, okay.
We have about 30, 35 minutes, and nothing going on, so nothing to talk about whatsoever. I do want to start with, you talk about momentous events. It is a time of uncertainty and risk, and I want to start with your government's, your leader's decision to prorogue, and your thoughts about Parliament not sitting at a time when we do have, as of January 20th, some very real policy issues to respond to.
Well, I mean, it is well known what we have gone through in the last few months. I mean, people would have seen that Parliament has been basically not functioning properly, I would say, serving Canadians. There was this motion in the House. Not much has been happening. And I think we needed some form of a reset. At some stage, you have to say when things are not working, it's like in business, you just can't go on. You have to have a change. You need to have a reset. And I think that's what prorogation was about. And also, I would say, let's remember, there's always a government in place. And our first duty to the country and to Canadians and to businesses and to workers, like I said, if we had, if I reflect, and trust me, it's like managing a call center for me over the holidays. There's been a lot of calls. I would say if what we went through as a nation could look like a storm, what is coming up may look like a hurricane. And therefore, all eyes and all hands are on deck to make sure that we either prevent, although it looks less likely, or we prepare for what the Trump administration may impose in terms of tariffs on Canada. And duty first. So for me, you're right. I think we had that, and as a team, we had to go through that. There's a leadership race, I'm told, and I may have something to say about that. But at the same time that we have that, I think this is a moment for leadership. This is a moment for us coming together as Team Canada. We are never as strong as when we speak with one voice, and certainly at a time like that. I was there in, I would say, President Trump version 1, and the relative strength in my dealings, I always go back to the art of the deal. I think that this is something we should keep in mind, that we as a nation need to look strong, we need to look confident, we need to look ambitious, and we need to be strong. And I think that's the type of attitude that I'm taking, and we need to bring to Washington. I'll be there for the inauguration as well as others. But I think, and even Premier Ford and others in the country have really embodied that response, which is, we need to stand up, speak up, and elbows up, because the Pax Americana that we have enjoyed for the last few decades, I think, is transforming. The last 10 years have been quite a change. So therefore, elbows up and chin up, and let's make sure that we do the best for Canada.
In the last round, Trump 1.0, we responded to tariffs when they came. There's a great talk now about preemptive, about lists of sectors, about items that we might what's your thinking as a minister in the conversations, but also as a trade expert about the best way to handle this?
You need a robust response. I think that's what anyone who imposed tariff would respond to, and certainly I would think the Trump administration. We've been there before. So in a sense, we have the experience, we have the expertise to do that. You don't want to escalate, but you want a response. And you want to have, I always like to say, can we turn the threat into opportunities? Because for me, when I look at the world today, I think that stability, predictability, and the rule of law is in high demand and short supply. We live in an era of a lot of turbulence. And you know, when we went to Washington, and as co-chair of this Canada-US team, I've always brought three things. You know, we had a very simple message because that's how you need to approach these things. The first one was around security and security of the border. So this is nothing new. We knew that this would be something coming up. And it's in Canada's best interest to protect our border. And therefore, we had already acted on that. Then is security with respect to the Arctic and the North. And I think that is something that we need to double down, in my view, if you ask me, because that's a place where Canada, as part of NATO as well, can play a big role. The second one was supply chain resiliency and making sure that people understand south of the border the integrated nature of our supply chain. We tend to know it, but I keep saying there's very few people who wake up in the world in the morning thinking about Canada. And so you have to remind that to our friends all the time, that there is no two nations in the world who have more integrated supply chain than Canada and the US. And I like always to joke when I go in Washington, I say, I hope you're happy to see me, because I'm your biggest customer, by the way. I buy more, we buy as Canadian and Canadian business, more from the United States than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. So when people are going there, we should chin up, elbows up. I mean, we have a lot to offer and a lot to talk about. You know, sometimes I'm tired to just be seen as the nice guy from the North. I want to be seen as the strategic partner of choice. Canada has been blessed by geography. We have the critical minerals that are going to be needed, and there's a lot of mining company here to fuel the economy of the 21st century. If you agree that semiconductor is the DNA of progress, you will need critical minerals. And I would say even critical minerals are going to be akin to oil, I think, in the 21st century. They're going to be very, very precious in the way how you develop and what they're needed for, whether it's the decarbonization or even whether it's about semiconductor. And by the way, I'll just put a parenthesis and I'll stop there. Folks may not know, but 80% of all the semiconductor manufactured in the United States are packaged and tested in Canada. I reminded that to a good friend down south yesterday, which is someone who has a big influence. I said, do you realize if you're looking at tariff, what it's going to do to your stock market and to your business? If you want to put that, by the way, we package 80% of it. Now, you could say, well, we could do it. I'd say you could. That's going to take you at least a decade and probably tens of billions. So this interdependency for me, let's turn that around and say, how can we do more together and talk about Fortress North America, the Buy North America we had in version 1. I think it's a great opportunity. So we just need to bring that, and I appreciate that, in my view, we need to change a bit the channel and make sure that with President Trump, although he's mindful of that, but we need to double down on our message.
I would like you now to pretend that we only have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because
I get the message.
You're raising a lot, and I want to get through a lot. We can't seem to get critical minerals underway in this country, so we may have them, but they're not coming to market. Could we do better? Why aren't we doing better?
Oh, listen, we need to go faster. We need to go bigger. It's all about speed and scale. And people are in the room. I think, you know, if there was a time as a nation that we need to double down and say, you know, when I started 10 years ago, the world is very different, just 10 years. But if there was a point about trade diversification and diversification of market, I would say today is the time to do that. Let's launch like I'm always reminded by CDAO. CDAO relaunched the industrial landscape in this country. I think that we should really double down on the key assets that make Canada special. We have the talent. We have the ecosystem. We're the third largest manufacturer of aircraft in the world. We make cars. We make satellites. We have a large natural resources industry, mining. We have a large auto sector. We have the critical minerals. We have the renewable energy. And by the way, I reminded our friend down south, We are the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. So if you say no to Canada, you're basically saying yes to other countries, which I think would be much less reliable. And I think resiliency in supply chain is really what people are looking for.
On autos, I mean, President-elect did say recently we don't need to build autos in Canada. The Auto Pact is something we know Robert Lighthizer, who's behind a lot of his policies, is not a fan of. It's almost beyond imagining that you would strip that out of the Ontario and Canadian economy. But when you hear threats like that, what's the right response to it?
Well, I take it seriously, but I was talking to the CEO, you cannot undo what's natural. You know, there's the rhetoric and there's the reality on the ground. These supply chains have been built for a reason. They've been built over decades. Parts would move 6 to 7 times across the border. And if you were to change that or suggest that, that would take probably decades and tens of billions. I doubt that any manufacturer would certainly see that because, as you know, an administration is 4 years. You're talking about massive supply chains that have been established for a reason, is to provide more competitive prices to consumers. There's a reason why you have this kind of supply chain. And so on one end, you need to be mindful. On the other end, I would say, listen, why don't we turn that around and look at, it's like when I started and the auto sector was on the tread, I said that must be an opportunity. And that's where we landed Volkswagen, we landed Honda, we landed Stellantis. Why don't we turn that around and say, as part of the, there's going to be an NAFTA review, we have an auto pact. Why don't we look, for example, at a defense and energy pact with the United States and say, you know what, we're going to have to invest tens of billions in our collective defense in the next few years. Why don't we build these factories? We need to rebuild our industrial capacity. I'd rather invest that money in Canada and create jobs if we can build a defense industry at scale in the country. And on the energy side, listen, if you're saying no to Canada, you're basically saying yes to other nations because 60% of the oil that they import is from Canada. And I think U.S. consumers would be very scared at the pump if the price of gas were to go up. So for me, it's really I appreciate there's positioning and negotiation. We need to understand that. But at the same time, we have a lot on our side to offer. And you know what? Like on critical minerals, if our friends would not want our critical minerals, well, I can tell you that there's a number of nations in the world which would want our critical minerals. We signed an agreement with the Japanese. We signed an agreement with the European Union. So we have other access to market, but we need, to your point, to double down on what makes Canada special. What are going to be the things that the world is going to need, whether it's our allies in South Korea or Japan or South, or allies in NATO, and double down on these type of things? Because for me, Canada is the land of opportunity in the 21st century. When you have that, when you have the talent, the critical minerals, the ecosystem established, the energy, and you have access to market, you're in a great place in the world, which is pretty challenging these days.
Who wouldn't want to be prime minister of such a country?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, there's a list. It's growing. We do need to talk about it. You have an announcement to make, and people are waiting.
Yes. This was one of the questions I thought you'd be asking me, of all. Listen, I've been touched by the number of Canadians who have reached out across the country. I've been touched by the volunteers and organizers across the country who said, we are willing to step up. I've been touched by colleagues who have said, we could use your leadership at this time. And I thought very carefully about that period. And I come to the conclusion that I will not be seeking to be the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada for the upcoming race. I will dedicate my energy to defend Canada, to defend Canadians, to defend Canadian businesses. It was probably one of the most difficult decisions in my life, but I think it's the right one at the right time. And so this is... Comme je disais, parce qu'il y a des amis francophones aussi dans la salle, j'ai vraiment été touché par le nombre de Canadiens et Canadiennes qui m'ont écrit à travers le pays. Des gens que je connaissais moins, des gens que je connaissais plus. J'ai été touché par beaucoup de bénévoles qui nous ont demandé de dire Monsieur le ministre, on serait prêt avec vous. J'ai été touché par des collègues, beaucoup de collègues qui sont venus me voir en disant ton leadership pourrait nous aider dans cette période-là. Mais j'en suis venu à la décision difficile que je ne solliciterai pas la chefferie du Parti libéral du Canada pour cette course, que je dédierai toute mon énergie pour défendre le Canada, pour défendre nos travailleurs, pour défendre notre industrie. C'est une décision difficile, mais c'est la bonne décision au bon moment. And so, and I appreciate your support, and trust me, I always want to fight for Canada. And there's many ways to fight for Canada. You're fighting for Canada. Workers are fighting for Canada. Businesses are fighting for Canada. Families are fighting for Canada. I'm going to fight for Canada. There's many ways to do that, but I would say, the one thing I would say, let's keep fighting together, because this is a moment, it's a momentous time for Canada. I've never been more hopeful about this country, and I always say, let's seize the moment, let's be ambitious. If there's one thing, as this might be one of my speaking engagement to talk about, I would say, if I have a dream that I hope would be shared by all Canadians of all walks of life, an ambitious Canada. Let's be ambitious. Let's seize the moment. Let's be confident. Let's really embrace the 21st century as our century. And I think if we all collectively have that kind of energy and attitude, we're going to do well.
Will you run in the next election?
Can I take one decision at a time? Because this is already a big day for me, Amanda. You don't take lightly the opportunity to lead a country like Canada. Canada is the envy in the world. Canada is a beacon of prosperity. Canada is the land of prosperity. Canada is really a place where the future we can build, and we have a country to cherish. And one of the things I've seen over the last few years and months, that's why I started very strong and say, let's be proud. Let's really bring that. You know, we have that as Canadians, part of our DNA. People who came in this country was not easy. A lot of people came here with their families from different backgrounds. They build their family, they build a story, they build success. And so I would say, for me now, today is already a big day. Not only because you and I are on stage with a few friends, but also because this is a big day, and it was a very tough decision. But one thing I can say to you and all Canadians who are watching, I'll be fighting every single day for Canada in whatever capacity, because that's the country I love. This is the country we love, and this for me is the country of the 21st century.
It is, if the polls are to be believed today, unlikely that whomever does win the leadership of the Liberal Party will lead beyond the next election. And that Pierre Poilievre will form a government of some kind, majority, minority, we don't know. Those are just what the polls tell us today.
Yeah. The best poll is in the street normally. But
and in an election campaign, much can change.
Yes.
But let's assume that that happens. What of your government's record and policies do you least want to see changed? What are you worried about being reversed on?
I think that what we've achieved, and this is a group of business people, we've been there for Canadians at a time of need, and I think we should always be, this is also a way to distinguish Canada from any other country. We stand with each other in times of need. I think that we have been able to seize generational opportunities. I think we have reshaped the industrial landscape of this country from the auto sector, from the aerospace sector, and I would wish that we don't reverse that, because I think that we have prepared Canada best for the 21st century. And I would also hope that whomever would have office brings Canada on the international stage as a voice. You know, I see the world in 5 Ds, you know, and you say 5 macro trends that I said, which are defining. I call that the 5 defining Ds. The first one is around decarbonization. And one thing can be certain, whether we like it or not, and if there are people who are still doubtful, is that climate change is going to be there. Whichever administration, whichever government is going to be there, climate change is the challenge of our generation and probably of the century. And in terms of decarbonization, Canada is lucky. We are ahead of the curve. We have decarbonized our steel and our aluminum, our auto sector. We're looking at aerospace. So we are ahead of the curve on decarbonization. The next D is digitization. The world is becoming digital. With AI and quantum, I think, you know, I always say human brains is not well wired to think exponentially. You know, we think linearly. You know, if you ask people what's going to be in 5, 10 years, it's easy. When you go beyond that in 30 years from now, it's very difficult. You know, I come from an age where, you know, we had a black and white TV at home, and today you tell that to your kids and say, no, I was not there with the Flintstone. This, you know, but time is accelerating, although physicists would probably disagree with me. The next D for me is about demography. And we know that demography is destiny, so can we still attract talent? The fourth D would be around disruptions. We're going to live in a world of disruptions. Elbows up, whether we like it or not. Like I said, maybe after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we were all sailing in a place where we had this kind of peace dividend, prosperity, stability. Now we have war in Europe. We have tension in the Taiwan Strait. We have conflict in the Middle East. And the last one is democracy. We need to fight for democracy. I am really concerned. I lived 20 years in Europe, and I see the state of democracies around the world. And I think that we should not take democracy for granted. And I think in that sense, Canada can be a beacon of hope for the world. We have built the best country, but let's not assume anything. Let's double down on our institution and what we are as Canadians.
One of those Ds, the demography problem, is one that, of course, immigration is designed to help solve. Immigration has been seen as a policy misstep on the part of this government because it went so far and then virtually reversed itself. Was that a mistake? I'm curious because there was obviously an idea behind this mass immigration, and many intelligent people who knew it would tax housing and education and healthcare, and we did it anyway. Is the reversal the mistake?
I think the mistake would have been doing nothing when you see a challenge. I mean, many people here are in business. If you see your market changing or your customers changing, you need to change. I think being stubborn in continuing a policy that you see does not as challenges and continuing, I don't think that is serving Canadians. You know, one thing that I've learned in politics over the last 10 years is kindness and humility. Every job looks easy when you're not the one doing it. I can assure you that I would think it would have been a mistake not to take stock of where we were and what we needed to do to correct course. And I think, you know what we need in politics these days is authenticity. People wanted you to be authentic. When you see things, I think gone are the days, people have access to information, people are well informed. Gone are the days where you stand up as a leader or political leader in any shape or form and pretend that you would have all the answers. I think the humility sometimes to say we need to change course, and I want to applaud my colleagues for that, because one of the great things in our democracy that I've learned over time, this is not a presidential system. You're only government, you're only minister, you're only prime minister if you have colleagues which are elected in their own riding, and they bring their voice of their people to you. And if you listen to them, usually, always, I would say, you take the right policy. Because, you know, the thing is that you should have as least of a distance to the people than you can. And I would say colleagues in that have been a great source of inspiration, because our system is made like that. You need to listen to folks, and I would say they've done a great service. When things were not right, the first one to know is people in the community, and therefore you should listen.
What do you hear from the business community about the industrial policy of the government? I mean, we're in a new era to talk about how things have changed in 10 years. Industrial policy is in, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act in the US or the big investments your government made in individual companies that would run counter to the thinking of trade experts over time.
Well, you need to fight. Hey, listen, I am proud of having fought every single day to bring investment in this country. We are in competition with the world. And I believe, yes, you need to intervene, and yes, you need to be there. I'll give you, I'm writing a book, so I'll give you a free chapter. Hopefully you're still going to buy the book. But yeah, no, I'll give you an example. True. And I kept all the text messages, so you'll see them in the book. So Volkswagen. I'll tell you in 30 seconds if you want the short version. How did that happen? So Volkswagen, I read in the FT at some stage, and my staff would smile. They've heard the story 20 times or 300 times. And I heard that they were looking to make a factory in North America for electric vehicle, about the Jeep. I can't remember which kind of Jeep they were talking about. So I asked friends, and I said, okay, can someone find out the CEO's number? What are you doing? Well, I said, the Europeans never invested in Canada. Why would they ever? Well, I said, you know what? If you're in business and you only talk to your current customer, you're never going to get new ones. So let me pick up the phone. So anyway, I found a friend in Europe because we could not find the 1-800 Volkswagen. So I called the guy in the US and I said, hi, I'm Minister Champagne. He said, okay. I said, I know you sell car in my country, but I don't see you much. I said, why don't you consider? He said, okay. I said, why don't you bring the board? Let's do a deal. When you bring the board, bring them to Canada. It's a great place. And we hang up and I give him my cell phone. 3 months later, I get a text and Minister, we're coming. And true to God, we're walking, so the board's coming, we're walking on I think it was Dundas or Young. And I look at the team, I said, this is your Teichmann there. The team said, who's this guy? Well, I said, he's the chief procurement officer of Volkswagen. You know, you bring me these books, you put their picture, I recognize people. So 12 brands, the whole group. I walked at this guy, I said, you must be your Teichmann. The guy looks at me, he's like, yes, I am. I said, hey, listen, I just want to say welcome to Canada, I'm the minister. That guy's freaking out. That became the story of the board that day. They say they love us so much in Canada that they recognize you in the street, so you come invest. And from there, we saw each other at Davos, and I saw his boss. Then 2 years after, we got the Volkswagen investment, which is the largest mega factory outside of Germany. This is how things happen. And it's countless of stories. Obviously, you need to have the basis. You need the workers, you need the industry and all that, but you need to fight. You need to be hungry. You need to go there. I don't say maybe it would have happened otherwise, but one thing I know is that it's the same thing when they did Moderna. It's the same thing when we redesigned our landscape, because we said we need to have strategic investment. And I look back, if we didn't fight with the IRA, Amanda, how much of that would have gone south of the border? We got our fair share. And by the way, for all of those, we said, of all the investments we have, which is about, close to 40 billion, I think we were very smart because it was based on a tax credit, what we offered. We probably disbursed a few $100 million so far to land about $40 billion of investment. If I was in a bank, people would say that's a pretty good return.
Some of it won't come to pass because the battery technology isn't where the companies need it to be. The EV market is not where people thought. And the winds of change are shifting on climate change as well, let's face it. It's still a worthwhile investment?
I'm always smiling and I say, I agree. I mean, listen, we've been doing the same thing for 100 years. So obviously, when you change technology after 100 years, you have to adapt to consumer demand, the supply chain. It depends when you look at the time. Do you look at the next week, next month, next decade, or next 100 years? There's 2 data points I'm always reminded. The largest single investment in Honda's history, not in Canada, in the world, the largest investment they made in 75 years was in Canada, $15 billion, which happens to be the largest investment in Canada's history by one company. And if I think about the EV revolution, the 7th largest market cap in the world happens to be Tesla. 1.3 trillion last time I checked. So I said, you don't need to take it from me, but if the company who's selling only electric vehicle has the 7th largest market cap in the world, there must be someone who believes that this is a company with some future. I'm not an analyst, but I look at that and I say there must be something. They sell only electric cars. So I think that the mistake would have been not to prepare the auto industry for the future, not to bring these investments in Canada. And I think 10 years from now, if you still invite me on your show, I think we'll look back and say, you know what, this was a good shot for Canada. And I think that we live in a world of industrial policy where governments are active because you need to put your foot forward. Like I said, not everyone in the world wakes up in the morning thinking about Canada. You need to bring your story down. I was saying that to the governor of Illinois. Imagine Illinois for that. I hosted the governor, and he liked it because I said, Governor, if you were a country, you would be part of the G20. He gave me the biggest hug. I said, yeah, your economy is $1 trillion. You'd be part of the G20. And I was thinking about that. Who in the world would not love to be next to a $1 trillion economy that you could drive by car? I was with a CEO and he said, proximity is everything, Minister. He said, if I have a problem, you see these global supply chains which are becoming more regional. And you say, you know what I like about Canada? If something goes wrong, I can truck stuff across the border. And if they go really wrong, I'll go with my pickup truck, pick it up itself. And I think, let's remember that we have a unique opportunity. And I know we live now in a challenging period as to how our trading relationship will be. But we have been blessed by geography in terms of where we are, our market access, our neighbor. And that's what we need to double down on and show to our American friends and bring our message that, you know what, in a world which is fraught with uncertainty and turbulence, we can really lead the world when it comes to AI. We can lead the world. And by the way, when you talk about AI, you talk about energy. And you don't need to take it from me. Read Gary Cohn. Gary Cohn used to be the advisor to President Trump, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, vice chairman of IBM. If you read, and I was with him at an event, you say, if you look in the US power generation and consumption before the digital economy, they're pretty much straight lines. If you add AI and quantum, you have a dislocation. He would be, and many would be, Canada is the answer. If you want me, when I would go in Washington, would be, Mr. President, let's talk about energy. We could be energy superpower. Now and there's people from Bruce, but just think about that and I'll leave you with that. But if you think about that today, because of the investment of Brookfield in Cameco, and because we have Candu, Canada is probably indirectly owning 50% of the nuclear installed base in the world. Think about that, what we can do in the world. Imagine if we brought to our American friends and say, let's bring nuclear energy around the world. And we could be like this superpower in countries like Argentina and Australia. We can build these things, we can maintain them, we have the equipment, we have the fuel. We could be selling energy as a service. Just think about that if we were to team up together and say, let's go around the world and make sure that we're going to help all these people around the world who will need energy.
That's the sales pitch. But in the meantime, do we use energy, oil, and electricity as a bargaining chip in a trade war?
I would turn that around in a sense. Let's try to do more together. That's why I'm thinking about an energy pact. For me, I'm more about that. I think that you always have to be mindful how you, like I said, I come from Shawinigan. You may have seen the letter from my neighbor, the little guy, and what he was saying. He always told me, it's always interesting. He said, "There's very little that the U.S. buys from Canada that they don't need." He said, "Always remember that." And it's true. My point is that if you say no to Canada, who are you going to say yes to? We're your closest ally, partner, and friend. And by the way, we have other markets because energy is economic security, and economic security in this world is national security. So we need to organize ourselves as a nation to make sure that we have access to more market, that we can export our oil, that we can export our gas, that we can have market for our critical mineral. We need to double down to make Canada the indispensable partner of choice in the 21st century. I just don't want to be the nice guy, although you were nice to say that in your introduction. I want to be the strategic guy that you call because you need. And I think together we're going to be stronger. In a world like that, I think, and by the way, it's the same thing with respect to China. Let's put that on the table. We have been more aligned with the United States than about any country to understand that we need to make sure that we protect our critical supply chain. And I think we need to get credit for that, to say we get it. We're going to protect our supply chain. We're going to be with you. And in this world, you have no better ally than Canada.
Do you think that we should see a bipartisan approach to the Team Canada effort on trade? Should the parties come together right now rather than being divisive, by nature in the middle of a coming political campaign? Should there be a joint effort?
I wish. I can tell you, you know me. I'm in politics, but I'm not over partisan. I try to reach out. We've been less successful than in Team Canada version 1. In the sense that you need two to tango. I may be a nice guy, but you need someone to reply to your text message. And therefore, we've been trying to engage. I think last time was probably easier in the way that we were negotiating or renegotiating NAFTA. So there was kind of a sense. This time it's a bit more diffused. And I wish, because I think that there's no doubt that when we speak with one voice, it brings more firepower to the table. And I would say for all of those who can look at the future and make their guess, there's only one person that I know who knows if they're going to be tariffed and what they're going to be, which is President Trump. Anyone else, I would say, is somehow guessing. There's only one that knows for certain what's going to happen. But let's remember, and that's why I was engaging with everyone in the House to say, imposing tariff is tough. Removing tariff is even tougher. So it is in everyone's best interest to work with us as we prevent and otherwise prepare. And that's the thing, you asked me about my decision before, and a lot of what I've decided is also that we need to prepare Canada. My job is to prevent, otherwise to prepare. And prepare is to make sure that we would have firepower to make sure that we can help industries that could be targeted specifically. And, that is what I'm doing now very much, is to make sure that we have the firepower to protect and defend our industries and our workers.
By not running, you stay in cabinet, you stay at the table, you'll be part of the response to whatever comes in the next weeks or months until there's an election. The business community is full of fear and uncertainty. And how that plays out is an unwillingness to invest and expand and take on workers. And we saw it in the first Trump administration. Businesses sat on cash. What's your message of reassurance, if you have one? How do you reassure business leaders in this country that it is going to be different, or it's going to be at least okay, that they should take risk?
I think you're quite right. I think the level of confidence in this country needs to go up. I agree with you. That's why I talk about an ambitious Canada, a confident Canada, a prosperous Canada. Let's be mindful, though, when people say that, I always put an asterisk next to that. In 2023, if you look at foreign direct investment, the first country in the world was the United States, the second was Brazil, the third was Canada. If you adjust on a per capita basis, we're the first. Three landmark investment. The first one that you can look is BHP. BHP, which is the largest mining company in the world. When I was the CEO, the BHP investment in Jansen in a potash mine, I think phase one was around, don't quote me, but now there's a few cameras, I'll be quoted, I think was 9 billion, and I think phase two was like 12 billion. This is north of 20 billion that has been invested. By the way, it is the largest investment in BHP's history in more than 130 years. When the CEO called me, he said, do you realize how much I love Canada? We've invested, the largest investment by the largest mining company in the world was in Canada. The second thing you can look, I mentioned Honda, which happens to be the largest investment in Honda's history, 75 years, and the largest investment in Canada. The third one is Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical, 150-something years when I was with them. Dow Chemical, the largest investment in Dow's history, not that year, in more than a century, was made in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. So when people say, do people trust Canada? I said, listen, we had a number of amazing foreign investment. I agree with you that we need to do more on permitting. We need to get faster. We need to be more nimble. And I think it's at the time of, what we're facing now should really galvanize us as Canadians to say, you know what, let's roll up our sleeves. You can look down or roll up your sleeve. I would say chin up, elbows up. Let's make the world need what Canada can do. And let's not do like what we did in the past. It's not about shipping our natural resources down. It's about making stuff in Canada. And I think if we make ourselves indispensable, you know what, the world will be coming to Canada because we have what the world needs in the 21st century.
That's unfortunately all we have time for, Minister, but I do want to thank you for your time here today, and please join me in thanking Minister Champagne.
Thank you, everyone. Let's seize the moment. Let's be ambitious. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Hi, everyone. How do you feel? Yeah, it's a big day. It's a big day. But we'll start. Whoever wants to go first, I'm happy to. Can you speak louder, just a bit bigger? Well, this is a decision for another day. Today for me was a big day. Was an emotional day also because, like I said, I was really touched by the number of Canadians from all walks of life, from about every corner of the country, who wrote to me, who texted me, called me, and say you should consider running. I was touched by the volunteers, the organizers that really rallied and wanted to help. I was touched by colleagues who really say, We could use your leadership at this time. And so I made the difficult decision not to run as leader of the Liberal Party of Canada in the upcoming race, and to use all my energy to defend Canada, to defend our workers, defend our businesses. It was not an easy decision, but it was the right decision at the right time. And so now for me, it's all about making sure we prevent or try to prevent the likelihood of tariffs from the Trump administration, and otherwise prepare and be there for businesses, for our workers. And at the same time, keeping a close eye on the leadership. You know, I've been very clear that the next leader will have to be able to engage with Canadians in both official languages, that there'll need to be a debate in French, that we need to make sure that all regions of Canada are represented in their platform, in the ideas that they put forward. And for me, now it's a time for Canadians to, like I said, I want an ambitious Canada. I want a confident Canada. I want a strong Canada. This is a time for us to, seize the moment, be ambitious, elbows up, chin up, and let's make sure that collectively we put Canada in the best possible position at this particular point of time. Well, when you take a tough decision like that, you have to consider many things. First of all, it's about the support. For me, it's always about the people. Is making sure that whatever you put forward, can you help colleagues across the nation to get elected, to form government, to press also the opposition. I think they had they had of a holiday over the last few months, because now in a campaign for the Liberal Party of Canada, there'll be different policies put forward. But it's going to be a time also for Canadians to ask from the opposition, so what would you do? What would you have done in terms of industrial policy? What would you have done in foreign affairs? How would you deal with the Trump administration? And I think this is going to be a moment for Canadians to really see what the opposition has to offer. Because, you don't build a country with slogan. You don't fight tariff with slogans. You don't attract investment with slogan. You attract investment with hard work. You defend Canada by standing up, and you inspire Canadians by presenting them a vision where they will see that Canada is the place of the future. Donc, ce que j'ai dit aujourd'hui, d'abord, j'ai dit j'ai été touché par les messages que j'ai reçus des Canadiens, des Canadiennes d'à travers le pays. Beaucoup de messages qui m'encourageaient à considérer la chefferie du Parti libéral du Canada. J'ai été touché par aussi les organisateurs, les bénévoles qui me disaient, Monsieur le ministre, on est prêt avec vous, on a besoin de votre leadership. J'ai été touché par mes collègues qui m'ont sollicité en disant, c'est le genre de leadership qu'on aurait besoin. Mais j'ai pris la décision difficile de ne pas briguer la chefferie du Parti libéral du Canada pour la course qui s'en vient, mais plutôt de dédier mes efforts, mon énergie à défendre le Canada, défendre nos travailleurs, défendre nos industries. C'est une décision difficile, mais c'est la bonne décision au bon moment. Parce que le Canada a besoin d'être fort dans un moment comme celui-là. C'est le choix que j'ai fait de servir les Canadiens. Écoutez, comme je vous dis, aujourd'hui, c'est déjà une grosse journée. Les gens m'ont demandé est-ce que j'allais appuyer d'autres candidats. C'est le genre de questions qui sera de décision pour un autre jour. Aujourd'hui, vous savez, c'est déjà une grande décision quand on a des gens qui nous demandent de prendre le relais pour un grand pays comme le Canada, de faire ce choix-là. C'est un choix difficile, mais c'est le choix que j'ai fait dans les circonstances. Well, we are prepared. I mean, we have been signaling to Canadians and also to the U.S. administration that we would have a robust response. I mean, we all know that the way to deal with tariffs in a situation like that is to have a strong response. And that's what we're going to have. Our job is to, you know, I always want to turn threats into opportunities. Obviously, we're going to be talking about all sorts of things that we could do together, because I think it's a moment in time where, in fact, Canada and the United States should not do less together. We should do more together in light of the state of the world. Like I said, we have been blessed by geography. We have the talent. We have the very strong ecosystems. We have the critical minerals and proximity to mines, to assembly line, to markets. We have renewable energy. We have access to markets. So we come at the table very strong. And by the way, I keep reminding our friend down south, we happen to be your largest customer. I hope you're happy to see us. We're Canada. We're a G7 nation. We're a NATO partner. We're no small nation. We buy more from the United States than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. So we have to have the attitude of coming in a position of strength, a position of mutual respect, and making sure that we make our case, and we'll do that. So the first mission is try to prevent, although we have heard the rhetoric of the president, which seems to indicate that tariff would be likely. But on the other end, at the same time, to be prepared to respond, a robust response that will send a strong message, like we did last time. And then move on to say, okay, once we've done that, let's work together now to see how can we mutually look at these things in the benefit of our workers, because a decision on one side of the border will have an impact on consumer on both sides. That's what I'm going to be saying to, the U.S. networks when I'm going to be. I'm going to be with the governor of Michigan later on this week. I'll be at the inauguration, and I'll repeat that message because, it's kind of asymmetrical. We understand it as Canadians, but this is a message we need to bring to our U.S. friends. Sorry, I missed you on that. Well, listen, what I want to see, and I've been pretty vocal about that, is a leader that will be able to communicate with Canadians with both official languages. There'll be a debate in French. And I intend to play a role to make sure that the interest of Quebec will be duly considered in this leadership race. I think it has always been the case, and it needs to be the case in this race as well. Comme je le disais, j'ai été clair que le prochain chef du Parti libéral devra pouvoir s'exprimer dans les deux langues officielles, soit le français et l'anglais, qu'on ait un débat en français aussi. Et moi, j'entends m'assurer au cours de cette campagne-là que les intérêts du Québec soient défendus, que les intérêts du Québec soient mis de l'avant et que le Québec ait toute sa place dans cette course-là à la chefferie, parce que c'est très important. Et le Québec a toujours une place très importante au sein du Parti libéral du Canada.
Minister, yesterday the U.S. administration, Biden administration, imposed very strict restrictions on AI chip exports. Are you considering following suit for Canadian companies that make AI chips? Do you think the restrictions will have any impact on your build-out plans as exports will be limited?
Well, it's another example why Canada and the United States needs to work together. I have been saying time and time again that 80% of semiconductors manufactured in the United States are packaged and tested in Canada. So for me, it's another example where U.S. and where we have opportunities to align Canadian and U.S. policy to make sure that we protect our national interest and our national security. So obviously, when it came, for example, to steel and aluminum and EV vehicle coming from China, we were there to act, and we need that to be recognized by our U.S. partners, that we understand that we need to protect our critical supply chain when it comes to foreign actors like China and others, and therefore we're going to be looking very closely at what they do. Like you said, we've already taken measures with respect to Huawei. We took measures also with respect to the offices of TikTok in Canada. One thing they understand is that we're very serious when it comes to national security. Merci tout le monde. Merci tout le monde. Merci. Bonne journée. Merci.